Well, hello everyone. Here, show you right here. I'm talking about email services, and I know that we all probably want to know too is to where what's really the best way of how to describe email services, and you're probably thinking too is to where it's another way of how you want to call it is toward email service. It's your mailbox, right? And if you want to kind of look at that, is to where it's like a mailbox, but how many of us are really going to look at that is toward it. Typical mailbox right here. And likely thinking too that, well, really, that each time we think about, I'm like, each time that we do think about the email service a lot of times, and you're thinking too, is that, really, that a lot of these job applications are going to say is toward, we'll go ahead and mail you the details a lot of times. So a lot of times it sure seems that way. That how many of us can remember that back whenever we were much younger? That do you really get excited whenever you do check the mail for any reason that you want to go ahead? I'm like, yeah, if that's like the only source of attention, about most kids would say too. That whenever you do check the mail, a lot of times it's at least it's a favor that you can do for mommy and daddy. Maybe until mommy or daddy get home or something like that, or it's a favor that you can maybe at least do for somebody, or maybe if it's about something important. A lot of times it seems like that's usually what it is, about something important. But how many of us are really going to maybe say is toward to talk about for email services? It's another way of receiving the important documents. Yeah, I'll just say important packages too. You like packages and documents that do come in the mail, right? And so that's why it sure seems that way. That every time we think about email, that a lot of everybody else might say is to where the first thing that comes to your mind is the computer or something like that. But most of the time, that it's like, that if you were to go ahead and make a list of about the different things that come to your mind every time you hear about email, though you're thinking, what exactly is it that you're thinking about whenever you do think about email? A lot of times, are you necessarily thinking about the inbox on the computer? Are you thinking about the letter carrier, bin or something like that, or what you call that? It's the safety deposit box or something like that. But it sure seems that way, that every time we speak of emails, though, that you're always 102 is to where that the emails that you may 102 is to where that whenever you do check your inbox, your mailbox for anything important, and you at the time you're always 102 is to where that how come you don't just call it an envelope? And like everybody else might even say that you usually whenever you check your emails a lot of times. Whenever you check your email a lot of times, it sure seems that way. That how come you can't just get specify a an envelope? So like it sure seems that way, that every time we think about email service, though, and you want to know too, is to where that every time we mention email a lot of times, you're likely want to know too, is to where that why can't maybe anybody? I'm like, yeah, talk about for the package or for the present or something like that, but why can't you prefer? That the name for it will be, something like a mail, like an envelope or something like that. And so each time we think about that, and like, everybody probably say too that, like during the day or the night, that you got an email service that you check during the day, maybe at nighttime, that you got an email service that you check at night, right? But at the time, you're always 102 that, whenever you do think about email a lot of times, that the first thing that you think about is the computer. Like, well, you need a computer in order to be able to do that. But how many times are we gonna maybe say is toward yeah? How often do we really need a television set, just to be able to use the service? And but it's like, yeah, well, really, that every time you think about that, though, that you're gonna go ahead and just say that, yeah, well, you'll go ahead and just, if you've seen these icons right here before, then for sure that you'll want to go ahead and yeah. So like anybody else would say too, if you're playing like a scratch off lottery ticket, like a game card, like a bingo game card or something like that, and every time you're thinking too that whenever you get any email messages or any other sorts of messages, and let's just say that all you were doing on there, if anything, was just checking your inbox for any messages. And let's just say that if one of those was an invitation, like everybody else might even say, that the invitation would look something like this. It's like, yeah, I invite to this special event or something like that. And like a lot of times, it sure seems that way, that a lot of the emails that we do get now, that it's like, when we think about that, though, talk about for email services, though, that like I'm thinking is to where, hey, that when we do think about a lot of times about, email services, though, and you're also thinking is to where that to this, special, to this special event. I'm trying to put this in so that way we can read it, but anyway, but talk about invite. We invite you to come. So it's like you check the email, right? And a lot of times it sure seems that way, that a lot of stuff that maybe you don't quite understand during the time, like you didn't quite understand it all, what all that meant right there during the time. So let's just say that if you were to be checking your email a lot of times, and people may even think too that as toward that there is a way that you can respond to that tenant or that client that's trying to talk to you and trying to send you that message. You got right here is the date and time and all that was sent and all that, right? And so that's why it sure seems that way. That why is it that nowadays that like with most email services, though, that whenever you check your email a lot of times, what you really are doing, really, that you're really checking it just because that you're trying to you're checking your account, you're just trying to check something, or you're just trying to review like the activity that's going on in your inbox, right? But like everybody else might even say, is toward it whenever you check your inbox a lot of times, that some of those messages that were even like everybody else may say, is toward it this person right here may be trying to talk to you, maybe through Instagram or maybe through Twitter. But like anybody else would say, that most of the time with the emails, that you're able to get those email alerts directly by the email, right? So a lot of times, like everybody else might say, that your email inbox would be the spot where you would check most of the time for almost all the activity that we do online. But it's like, it sure seems that way, that we're talking about that. How often are you going to really use that thing compared to connecting to somebody over the telephone or something like that? But nowadays, with a lot of these jobs, though, job applications and everything, and like everybody else might say, is toward it, while you were sleeping, that there's been updates going on and all that, progress that was made and all that, right? But it sure seems that way, that every time we think about job applications, though, that you go by, say, is toward the 10 things, great, but still, I can also put on here, talk about for, add your name, your name, and then, so it sure seems that way a lot of times, that almost every application that we're going to be filling out, right? And you're also 102 is to where that if you are not registered for the account, or if anything, that if you're gaining access to the portal, from this kiosk or the terminal from from maybe even from a public computer lab or somewhere like that, and you're always want to know too that a lot of these processes, the settings processes and all that, which sometimes that can maybe take up to an hour or two. Just I'm like, yeah, maybe a half an hour, if anything, a half an hour at the most. But at the time, you're always want to know too is that every time you're working on this, and you're all thinking too is toward every time somebody says email though. That why can't they just say the envelope or something like that? You want to know too that why can't they just say envelope, and maybe if you use that word in a source of definition toward it, check your the big floppy envelope or something like that. Check your envelope, or if you want to give an envelope a name. And like anybody say that if you don't prefer the word email, then for sure that you can go and check your mailbox and locate that envelope. It's that envelope. You just click on the envelope from your phone, and then it'll show you what the messages say. And so it sure seems that way that how many of us have really dreamed about this source of technology, especially when we're talking about that it works up to 5 times faster than compared to other. So I'm like, maybe having to wait 4 days just to receive a response or something like that. But a lot of times it sure seems that way that every time I do think about the email, though, I'm also thinking too that back whenever I was younger, I can remember that using the computers at the schools, and a lot of times the teachers were kind of like telling me that you're not supposed to be on that, especially if it's not in your name or something. But so it's like, that every time I think about the email, and I can be honest with everybody too, that every time you think about the email though, that if it's not yours, you're not supposed to be reading it. And but still, but at the time, it sure seems that way that for that's for the teachers. The teachers really should be on there. But in case of anybody that may want to word it, that story is going to kind of remind me of back whenever I used to go into the teachers' lounge. I went to the teachers' lounge a couple times. Say that there was a soda. I guess there were soda machines and other things that they had in there in the teachers' lounge, and it's like. I remember going into the teacher's lounge a couple of times, and just to get something to eat or something like that. But a lot of those other teachers would even say too that I can show you how this email works, and we can go and write to your teacher, who's teaching over there at that other school district. So I can remember that was I think it was back in 1996, I think it was, and I can just remember the first time I used the email, in which I think it was a Macintosh computer, or it may have been an IBM computer, some computer like that, but I can just remember that writing to the teacher, and I think she responded within an hour's timing, but I can just remember the first time I sent an email, and you know how that is that most email services though that there will be a spot right down here to where it says to and from, and so it's like to and from right here. And so I really don't know if how many of us have really got that confusing whenever it comes to if you're trying to send an email to somebody. And let's just say that a lot of times it's like that with CC, I guess CC pretty much means is toward it. If you want to go ahead and like go by the category toward it, the CC. Usually it's like the subject or something like that. It's usually the subject topic or something like that. But like anybody say that really that CC is really that's where the subject would usually go. But really that if you have like if you do have like a backup email address that you use, like if you want to send it to maybe 2 other locations besides your primary email and your default email or something. But a lot of times, every time I think about email service, a lot of times it sure seems that way. That why can't you just call it this the envelope. And you would maybe think too that every time you think about email, though, that you necessarily think about computer or that electronic device that you're using, or are you necessarily thinking about is toward it, the elevated mail or something like that, or if you want to kind of call it, is toward, to the evaluation system or something like that, or the elephant print or something like that. But I just really think too that, like everybody else might even say too, that if mail goes in the envelope, why can't you just call it envelope, and maybe just give it like a company name or something like that. But half the time it sure seems that way, that almost a lot of things that we get on the email, and you're thinking too, is yeah, well, you're used to putting a stamp on the mail, but then now this, it's like it requires the internet, of course, but half the time you're always want to know too that where you're supposed to put the stamp if you're going to be doing it this way. Like, well, where's the stamp go? Like, and you don't need no stamp, but still that so like everybody else might even say that when we do talk about you're probably thinking as to where whenever you do talk about email service a lot of times, you'll want to know too that what source of if you were to use that, I'm like, yeah, that right there, I guess it means open it. That one right there, like, yeah, flatten, or like, yeah, rendering, ready to be reviewed, and so there's different signs of how to tell about about your mail, right? And so that's why it sure seems that way. That every time we think about that, though, and you want to know too that okay, this right here, I'm like, yeah, please, you got a letter waiting for you to read or something like that. So every time we think about that, though, and want to know too that every time we think about mail, though, if it's email or if it's anything that is related to maybe a typical greeting card, that every time we think about that, though, and you think as to where you might see symbols like this right here, to where one of them could mean is toward it, yeah, there was response to your email from earlier, but it didn't go directly into your inbox. The response actually went into the root location from what you last opened or something like that. So a lot of times it sure seems that way. We're all going to be asking those questions for sure. That the last time you checked the email box, that the message wasn't in there, and so they're saying that you have an unread message, but it's saying that most of them that you're checking on the list on the category. So a lot of times you always want to know too that with most email services, though, that you're always wondering to where that if somebody did write back to you, from that same folder, but then it's like it's not going into your inbox. That message was actually sent into the envelope. So like everybody else may say that, whenever you do click on the mail right there, then it's possible that if you do get a response from a message from earlier or something like that, then it's going to tell you that, that this person went ahead and responded to your message right there. And they were kind enough to tell you that, it's not in your inbox. It's actually in that letter the letter that you recently opened. And it's been about, it's been 8 hours, since I last checked it or something like that. And so that's why it sure seems that way, that every time we think about email service, though, and you're always want to know too that have we really calculated that about the last time we checked it, that there were only 2 unread messages. You're right there. There were only 2 unread messages that were indicated right there, but then within about 8 hours later, that there's maybe 15 unread messages. And that's why you're always want to know too that do you think and believe that a lot of times, I'm like, yeah, it seems like that you have a lot more. And you always want to know too, like every time I visited my email, it sure seems that way that, those recipients, they're trying to get your attention for sure. And that's why it sure seems that way that, well, for sure, you're going to maybe have 50 unread emails if it's been 5 days since you last checked. And you're 102 that if you navigate and go somewhere else and if you navigate, maybe go to another email, or maybe if you do walk away, step away maybe for a few minutes or something like that, and you're always 102 that that whenever you checked it, that it said that it was empty, and or something like that. But so you 102 that empty, and whenever you did, whenever you were in there this morning, even that you only maybe had only maybe 2 unread messages on there, and you wait 8 hours. I can put on here. You wait 8 hours, and sometimes, if it's been an hour since you were last there, and you're wondering to where that, we sent you an email, we responded to your message earlier, but we're just waiting for you to respond to that, or that, people might even say that, they might even respond to your message indicating that, that they left you a tip, or something like they responded to your message, and they're waiting for you to read and accept that invitation. Most of the time it's an invitation. Yeah, most of the time it's an invitation. So if you're trying to invite somebody to a virtual event, a lot of times, and half the time that's usually what happens, is that whenever they send you an invite, but then it goes to your envelope location or the folder location or somewhere, and you don't see it right away. So that's why it sure seems that way. That every time you think about the email, though, that you really have to have like a phone or something handy, so that way you can follow up with the messages a lot of times. But we're also talking about job applications. We're also talking about other applications just to apply for maybe additional assistance, for insurance, other things like that. And that's why it sure seems that way. That if there is, for a better solution for that, and a lot of times it seems like it's always like to word it, make sure that you have your content. I'm like, make sure that you have your profile all updated with your contact information, because at the time you're always 102 is to where, you may just never know about your most important situations, right? But at the same time, no, it's like the reason why you use this email right here is mainly for work, or maybe for school, or you were mainly doing job point, work on there, like to where you were actually coordinating with the manager about, the orientation and the job training process or something. So, so every time we mention email, though, that you want to know too, that how come it always has to go by the category about, what do you think what are you using this for? Are you using this for business reasons or for personal reasons or anything like that? And that's why almost all the time that when we do think about email, a lot of times that you're thinking is toward that back whenever you were very young, know that you, if anything, you only had a backpack that you had to carry around, and that was like the only thing that you really had to worry about was making sure that you had a backpack, to keep all your school supplies and everything all organized, right? And like everybody else might even say that backpack though, but backpack, of course. Backpack does not deliver messages to other servers and other inboxes all around the country, around the world, or whichever. So half the time you always want to know too that why is it that the email service seems to be, like anybody say, is toward that seems to be much harder to keep up with and compared to that typical backpack. And you want to know too that things do come in and out of that backpack. but at the same time, like everybody else might say, that we're not talking about just 5 people that have if you got to turn in your class assignment or something like that, or fill out something or complete something, and so it's like this to and from, like and let's just say that if you were to be writing an email saying that these 2 pages need to be completed. Need to be completed. So I can just put on here, need to be completed and signed by Friday. So it sure seems that way. That so and whenever by Friday or something. So if you were to, like anybody else may say, that courtesy, like you would maybe write something like that if you're trying to do, like, maybe if anything, courtesy or anything real important or anything like that. But like everybody else might even say that you go ahead and use the email for that, right? And you also want to know too is that that's the type of stuff right there that back in the day that you probably did have to use a backpack or like a briefcase or something like that just to keep all that organized. But then now they have this email service, and that's why it sure seems that way, that that each time we think about email, that you're thinking is toward, usually that's over the computer, right, or the type of device that you're using. And that's why it sure seems that way, that really, it's people might say that it's that the way that it works now, that compared to how it used to work. But like people might even say that that a lot of stuff that maybe that not everybody really understands it, and maybe if anything that you're used to having coordinate. You're used to having somebody to coordinate with you and read those documents to you, read the application to you. Because most of the time, when we talk about emails, a lot of times that usually that there's usually you have somebody read the papers, but a lot of times when we go by emails, though, that you're able to connect to somebody virtually, and at least that they'll be able to walk you through, guide you through what needs to be done, right? But a lot of times it's like you're always want to know too that most of the time it's the email address that's going to be asked for, and so that's why it sure seems that way, that every time we think about email, though, that it's another way of, how do you want to call it, the backpack. And so you're likely thinking too is that backpacks can only hold so much, but email servers, for sure, we all know that you can maybe have hundreds to maybe thousands of emails in your inbox, and still you can still go in there and read most of them. But like everybody else might say, that it's that talk about the typical backpack, and that backpack is something that you normally would be carrying just to keep all your work all in one place, right? And that's why it sure seems that way, that every time we say email, though, that you're thinking is toward, really, that's how you would actually turn in your work to the teacher, or give somebody, return the application, the completed paperwork, you would give them to, for whoever that need it. But a lot of times it sure seems that way, that every time we speak about email, though, that you want to know too, that really, we don't call it the mailbox or the envelopes too much anymore. But like everybody else might even say, that if you're going to pronounce it as envelope, that you're always wondering toward it, that if you could go and consider it an envelope, then you can, the front view window right there, and just say it is toward it, really, this is where it needs to go right here, right? But a lot of times you always want to know too that there's a particular name for the envelope. If you have maybe 3 other connections, 3 other members that are connected to your mail. So let's just say if you have one envelope, but then let's just say there's a group name that decide to join that mailbox, and like I say that you have each mailbox, and let's just say somebody decide to go ahead and create a group name, and they're going to go ahead and say is this toward it talking about butter lips or something like that, or your favorite cookie or something. So it sure seems that way that every time we think about mail messages, so somebody's going to maybe be just checking it out and saying it as to where that, yeah, well, you have maybe 3 other members that are coordinating with some of the mailboxes, some of those mailing envelopes that you were visited earlier. So let's just say if you invite somebody to chat with you, and they say this to where a lot of those messages are not even going to your mailbox; they're going into that envelope right there. And so, and I know, like everybody else might say that for sure, whenever by the time you learn how to use a lot of stuff, then the more you'll use it, right? And but it sure seems that way that if you don't quite understand everything, and for sure you're not going to use everything, and that's why it sure seems that way that every time we speak about mail, though, and like everybody else would say that what does it usually mean whenever you're sleeping? Well, we hear things that are not really happening, but still, talk about this right here. Well, when we sleep, we dream. We are not working, but the work is still in progress, right? And those dreams will tell us what, like how to be surprised. And so a lot of times it sure seems that way that when we do talk about dreams, though, a lot of times. But anyway, but the way I think about it too, though, that when we do speak about emails, a lot of times people might say that a lot of those applications, a lot of times that 102 is that well, really that most of the time with most applications, though, that if that you fill them out like but still a lot of times it sure seems that way that you look at those applications, and you're always 102 that one simple mistake on your application, like everybody else might say that that the first thing is that they're going to be asking you about what your availability is Monday through Friday, and when are you going to be available for the training, and maybe when are you going to be available for the interview. And that might, some of those questions may be pretty hard to answer as well. But anyway, just talk about for email. But the way I think about it too, though, that when we do speak about email service a lot of times, I can thinking as to where email service is just another way of how to explain, about the job opportunity, another way of to explain the details. And those details, of course, for sure that whenever you looked in your backpack a lot of times, you're probably thinking as toward well, there were some things that you don't want to bother with that were in that backpack. And like, the teacher told you to do it during the time you didn't do it, and so like, well, you either you look at the envelope, or you didn't go through look through the packaging or whichever, but still that we all have our stories to why that maybe if we didn't do certain things, important things, and that we did do certain important things, but on the other hand too, that one of those reasons maybe why you didn't do it was because is like to word it, I didn't quite understand it during the time, but now I get the idea. Okay, I think I do know what the envelope means, and what the email means. But anyway, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.